Welcome to the new podcast, In the Garden with Susan. I'm your host, Susan Ladner. I will aim to bring you top quality information on how to save open pollinated seeds, grow a garden, and preserve what you grow. Every Wednesday, I'll be sharing practical tips and techniques to help you on your journey to food security. Join me as I preserve the abundance of produce that my garden provides. Learn new ways of putting food away for the winter and some old ways that are from another century. You can find this podcast on Shopify and at my website. Come on, let's go wander down to the garden and awaken the dreams, history, and love that is held inside every seed. Hello, and welcome to another edition of In the Garden with Susan. I'm really looking forward to today's show because it is about a tuber that I really do not know a lot about, even though I grew it and I've been digging it up and packing them up for winter and I still don't really know how to use them very much. I do know that they grew well in the garden without a lot of water, which was really great. They were planted beside the oca, and the oca didn't do very well, and I was a little worried about these guys, and they were right beside them, and they grew amazingly. They grew so well even that they were starting to encroach into the oca's area. They really were branching out. And so we're looking at the Chinese artichoke today. But I also, in case some of my listeners don't make it to the very end, I'm so excited for this news. I have to tell everybody right now, I'm really honored to have a guest on the next show. And she's from the Grow Network. I'm sure many of you know her and have heard some of her information that she's put out. Maybe you're part of the Grow Network. Maybe you've heard her she's on some different channels. I have heard her on the Adapt 2030 channel and also Ice Age Farmer. I think that's the first time I heard her. And so I'm really honored to have Marjorie Wildcraft is going to be on the next show. And I'm really looking forward to that. I'm so excited to all the knowledge that she is going to impart us with. And I'm sure we're going to learn so much. So that's my exciting news. And I'm looking forward just to spend some time and, learning a lot. But the thing I just want to also make a mention that if anyone does live in the Western US or Western Canada, maybe just take a look, even on my social media. If you go to Garden Fairy Botanicals on Facebook or Garden Fairy Seeds on YouTube, I have a GPS model that I found it from Adapt 2030, and it just shows that in January, we could have some extreme cold weather moving in. And if you see that you're you're living within where this massive cold is going to be, think about like what would you be living through if it's -50, and are you ready? So that's my big thing is being prepared. All right, that said, we're going to look at these unique tubers today. And the thing that's really interesting is they are from the mint family, which is kind of shocking. And they're also known as crone or knotwood. And it's a fascinating crop with a rich history. And they have a lot of culinary versatility that we'll start to look at, and very unique growing characteristics. So these plants are native to China and Japan, and they are a hardy perennial herbaceous plant with fuzzy leaves and small tubular flowers that are often purple, and it grows to about 30 to 60 centimeters tall. And the edible part of this plant are the tubers, and they are small, white, and knobby. and they resemble miniature spiraled shells. And the one day when, well, the time I was packing them all up for winter and going through them, I found a little guy that looks like the Michelin Man. And as we'll see as we get through some of this information, they do sometimes grow like the Michelin Man. So traditionally, they have been cultivated in East Asia for the tubers, and they have been part of traditional Chinese medicine and cuisine. In the 19th century, they were brought to Europe, and they were mostly appreciated in French cuisine, where they are called crone. Modern cultivation has found that they're not widely grown as other tuber crops, but they are valued in niche markets for their unique appearance and flavor. So to grow this plant, they thrive in temperate climates. They will tolerate light frost, but they prefer a long growing season. And I remember when I received them in the spring, I planted them right away. And I had them in little pots, and I think I was carting them in and out of the greenhouse, or not, well, later on in the spring, but I think I was bringing them in and out of my porch area, I didn't want them to freeze. I didn't know a lot about them, and I didn't want to lose them. So they grow best in loose, well-draining, sandy soils with a neutral to slightly acidic pH, and the soil must be free of rocks to allow the tubers to grow properly. They are grown from the tubers and not seeds, and you plant them in early spring or after the last frost. And I think that's something I did wrong. I got them planted a little later, as I just didn't know. You want to space your plants 30 to 40 centimeters apart in rows about 60 centimeters apart, and plant them to a depth of about 5 to 10 centimeters deep. Now, they do require consistent moisture, but cannot tolerate waterlogged conditions. And this is interesting because I grew them in dry, very dry conditions. In fact, they survived a drought, which is interesting that how much better could have they grown if I had given them consistent moisture, and maybe they would have been bigger, because the tubers I have, they're small. I wouldn't say any of them are rather large. They're not heavy feeders, and you can give them compost or a balanced organic fertilizer. I didn't feed them at all. Um, and they have minimal pest issues, and mulch will help suppress the weeds. And that is one thing. I made sure there were no weeds around them. Well, I had to. When you're not watering your plants, if you have a bunch of weeds surrounding some of them, the weeds are going to be taking the little water that's in the soil. Now, for harvesting them, you want to do this after the plant's foliage dies back in the late autumn or early winter. And that's something interesting. They actually, the plant died back before the oca did. And so I don't think they did well when the frosts were coming, because when I dug them up, it was all completely dead. And you want to carefully dig up the tubers to avoid damaging their delicate skin. They're best eaten fresh, but can be stored in slightly damp sand or refrigerated for a few weeks. Now, the culinary uses, since they have a mild, nutty, and slightly sweet taste with a crunchy texture similar to water chestnuts, they can be used any ways that water chestnuts can be used. And they are typically eaten raw, pickled, or cooked, and their delicate flavor works well in salads, stir fries, or as a garnish. The dishes in China they are culturally used in stir fries and soups, And in France, they are used in elegant dishes such as Crosnes sautés. The health benefits is that they are low in calories and high in dietary fiber and a good source of potassium and iron. They have prebiotic properties as they are rich in inulin, which is a type of fiber that promotes gut health, and they are known as a digestive aid and for maintaining a healthy microbiome. So wow, like I did not know that they were so powerful. In fact, this morning I just cooked some apples for the when you take organic apples and you boil them and you eat the apples and then you can drink the water after. That is really good for some with some prebiotic properties. So I did not know here that I had a whole bunch of these tubers that could be aiding in my digestion and giving me a healthy microbiome. For gardening, the gardening benefits is they thrive in diverse conditions and require minimal maintenance once established. And that is certainly true. I didn't do anything with these guys and they came out quite well. They have a perennial nature and can be treated as a perennial with tubers left in the ground to regenerate for the next season, and they grow well without the need for heavy chemical inputs. Well, who would be doing that anyway? You don't want to have any chemical inputs into your garden. Um, and so they are ideal for organic gardens. The tubers are small, so yields per plant are lower compared to other tuber crops, and the thin skin makes them prone to drying out, so they don't store as well as more robust tubers like potatoes. They can spread aggressively if not managed properly, becoming invasive in some regions. And I totally saw that. Like when I was digging up the oca, I had some Chinese artichokes like that were over, making friends with my oca. So the plants, some of the interesting facts about these plants are that the knobby tubers are often compared to tiny Michelin men. And I find that hilarious because I found one that looked exactly like a Michelin man. Um, the the Chinese artichokes are a popular ingredient in Japanese New Year celebrations, and their prebiotic fiber content has garnered interest in modern health conscious diets. So, how to grow them? Well, first you'll want to prepare the site and choose a sunny spot, although partial shade is tolerable. They like loose, sandy, or loamy soil, and you can work in compost or well-rotted organic matter to enrich the soil and improve drainage, but you want to avoid heavy clay, which can hinder tuber development. And keep the planting area clear of weeds, as Chinese artichokes compete poorly with them. You want to plant them in early spring after the first frost. In warmer climates, they can be planted in autumn. And for the tubers, you want to use healthy, firm tubers, as broken or dried out ones may not sprout. And we've already talked about the depth and spacing. And so for the care, again, we're saying that you need to keep the soil consistently moist, especially during dry periods. Well, I already proved this year that they can survive if they're not kept moist. Maybe that's due to their perennial nature. So they're a little more hardy. However, I think if you want optimal, now knowing this in coming years, I will keep them consistently moist, and apply a layer of organic mulch to retain moisture, suppress weeds, and regulate the soil temperature. And adding a light application of a balanced organic fertilizer midway through the growing season can be beneficial, and they do not require any staking. So for harvest, you're going to harvest them in late autumn or early winter. And once the foliage dies back, this is the signal that the tubers are mature. And then, of course, we already talked about taking them out gently. So for winter storage, how are we going to store these guys? Well, you're going to clean them gently, but don't wash them unless you're going to plan to use them immediately, and place them in a perforated plastic bag or slightly damp cloth in the refrigerator, and they will keep for about 2 to 3 weeks there. For the long-term storage, you're going to bury the tubers in damp soil or sawdust and keep them in a cool, dark, frost-free area, such as a cellar. And this will mimic their natural environment and keep them hydrated. And I have them right now in damp peat moss. For the in-ground storage, this is the easiest way to keep them. Just leave the tubers in the ground over winter in mild climates and cover the area with a thick layer of mulch or straw to protect them from frost. And you can harvest them as needed, ensuring the soil isn't frozen when digging. And I wish I'd known that before I dug them all up, because that is the optimum. I love crops like this that you can just leave them in the ground, and every time you decide you want to eat them, just go out and dig them up. Some storage challenges that might happen is because they have thin skin, they are prone to drying out. So you want to make sure they're kept in a moist environment, and the tubers bruise easily. So handle them with care to avoid spoilage. Some tips for perennial growth. If you're going to grow them as a perennial, just leave some tubers in the ground during harvest, and these will resprout in spring, providing a fresh crop the following year. And be mindful of their spread, as they can become invasive, and planting them in raised beds or contained areas can help manage their growth. Something about this, whenever I hear about invasive plants, my fix for that is you pull them up like they're a weed. If you go out there and you're like, oh my goodness, here's a bunch of Chinese artichokes plants growing here, I don't want them here. Well, you pull them up. I don't think it's not very hard to do. So for companion planting, these guys, they are versatile and they can grow alongside many different plants. However, they have specific needs and traits that make some companions better than others. The best companion plants are nitrogen fixers. Plants that add nitrogen to the soil will help them thrive, as they are not heavy feeders. And so they will go well with beans or peas. They like to be near pollinator-friendly plants that attract, these pollinary plants will attract bees and other beneficial insects, which will improve the health of your garden. And so they could be with borage or calendula and lavender. And I had these guys out there with some calendula this year. That they want to be near non-competitive plants because they compete poorly for nutrients and space. Choose plants that will grow upright and don't overshadow them. Some examples of this could be leeks, onions, or carrots. And you can do trap crops like nasturtiums that can attract aphids away from them if you have that problem. Avoid planting heavy feeders nearby, like tomatoes, corn, or squash, and these may deplete the soil nutrients, leaving little for the Chinese artichokes. And you don't want to put them near tubers or sweet potatoes that may compete for the space, and they could also share the same diseases. So now, for managing the invasive tendencies, because they can spread aggressively, one of the things, you can also grow them in containers. And if you have large, deep pots or planters that can house the plants while preventing spread, ensure it has good drainage to avoid waterlogging. You can also install barriers, physical barriers like underground edging or root barriers around the planting areas, and this will confine the tuber growth to a designated space. Regular monitoring and harvesting. If you dig up all of the tubers at the end of the growing season, this will minimize the leftover tubers that might sprout the following year, and remove the unwanted sprouts early in the season before they establish. And that's the way I would do it. Strategic mulching is that you can apply a thick layer of mulch around the plants, and this will not only protect the soil, but it also helps identify rogue sprouts that need to be removed. And you can grow in rotational beds and dedicate specific garden beds to Chinese artichokes. Rotate their location every few years to disrupt their spread and improve soil health. And I think that's a great idea. Having something grow in the same place, you're just going to start to attract pests, and anything that might start want to munch, get used to hanging out, living there and munching on them. Now for some recipes. I have here a sautéed Chinese artichoke with garlic and herbs. And you have your Chinese artichokes, which are cleaned, 2 tablespoons of olive oil or butter, 3 cloves of garlic minced, 1 teaspoon of fresh thyme or half a teaspoon of dried, a tablespoon of fresh parsley, or that can be chopped, it's optional, and salt and pepper. And so you just take your Chinese artichokes and heat the olive oil and butter in a skillet over medium heat. Add the garlic and saute until fragrant. Cook the artichokes by adding them to the pan and stir occasionally for 8 to 10 minutes until they're golden and tender. Add the thyme, salt, and pepper. Cook well for another minute. Sprinkle with parsley just before serving and enjoy as a side dish or light snack. That sounds delicious. You can also pickle Chinese artichokes, and I'm not going to read off all the recipes, but I will put them on my website. And I just realized I apologize to anyone who might have been looking for the oca recipes last week. I have to get those up there. I just recalled I didn't get that up. So yeah, we can pickle Chinese artichokes. We can make a stir-fried Chinese artichokes with vegetables. So that's kind of, just throw them in your stir fries. You can make a creamy Chinese artichoke soup. And so I wanted to look at some of the historical recipes, as they have been consumed for centuries, and they pretty much they only became prominent in European cuisine in the 19th century. So some of the historical recipes are often focused on simple preparation methods to highlight their delicate flavor and unique texture. And so I found a 19th century French crone à la beurre, Chinese artichokes with butter. And this is just a simple preparation that showcases their nutty flavor. And it was very popular in French cuisine during their introduction. And so you clean and you blanch the tubers. And you blanch them in boiling salt water for 2 to 3 minutes and then set them aside. And then you cook them in butter. And after, you drizzle them in lemon juice, salt, and pepper. And so that was something very popular. I have here a Chinese-style braised artichoke. And this mild braised dish reflected their use in East Asian soups and stews. And then there is a Victorian creamed crone, and this is a rich preparation reflecting the opulent dining trends of the Victorian era in Europe. And this recipe puts the Chinese artichokes into heavy cream with butter and a pinch of nutmeg. There is the Provençal style Chinese artichokes, and this is basically cooking them in olive oil with garlic, rosemary, thyme, and some zest of the lemon. There is a recipe here for Edwardian pickled crone. And so the pickled vegetables were a hallmark of Edwardian pantries, and Chinese artichokes were sometimes preserved this way. So I wanted to look now at some ways to preserve them. Like, I know you can leave them in the ground, but if you did dig up a whole bed, like, what could you do with them? And you can freeze them, as freezing is one of the most effective ways to preserve Chinese artichokes, and it does require blanching to maintain the texture and flavor. And these will last in the freezer for up to 6 months. You can pickle them, as we noted already. You can dry them. And drying is an option if you're looking to preserve the Chinese artichokes for long-term storage. And dehydrated artichokes are excellent for soups and stews. And so again, there is the option of blanching them to preserve the texture and flavor before you dry them. There's also storing them in sand or sawdust, which is called root cellaring. And you can keep them in the cool, dark place in the sand or sawdust and keep them viable for several months. You can them, which is not common as other preservation methods, but you can try this out if you'd like to make them into a shelf-stable dish, such as a chutney or a relish. And this is basically your cleaning and blanching them. You're putting them into sterilized jars and flavoring them with a syrup or brine, depending on your recipe, and then processing them. There's a few tips here for preservation that you want to make sure you label the date on your preserved items, and always check them for store or spoilage. Okay, so that is all the information I have on Chinese artichokes. If anybody has, been eating them or knows more information about them, or if any of my listeners have had them before, and what do you think of them? I'm really interested. I really should be getting in there and trying some out while I still have them fresh dug, and just seeing what they're like, because I didn't even eat one raw. And that's something very interesting. Like, I didn't really find any recipes that are using them raw. They're all cooked. Okay. Well, I look forward to talking with you next week when we have Marjorie Wildcraft on the show. And thank you all for listening. And I will see you in the garden.
Out in the field, take the morning light. We dig up treasures hidden out of sight. Knobby little gems in the warm soil at dawn. Chinese artichokes, from the earth they're drawn. Small and white like the pearls in the rough. Crunchy bites with the flavor so tough. Mild and nutty, a rare treat indeed. In every dish, they're the secret you need. Golden knobs of earth, they bring a simple grace, adding warmth and flavor to any place. Raw or sautéed or in a warm soup, in each little bite, we find life's truth. Pickled in jars on a dusty shelf, brings us back home to a taste of wealth. Adding crushed to salad, a farmer's delight. Chinese artichokes make our supper right, right. Grandpa taught me where to dig and seek in the fertile ground where life's mysteries peek. Now I pass it on hand to hand. Chinese artichokes, part of our land. Golden knobs of earth, they bring a simple grace, adding warmth and flavor to any place. Raw or sautéed or in a warm soup, in each little bite we find life's truth. Golden knobs of earth, they bring a simple grace, adding warmth and flavor to any place. Raw or sautéed or in a warm soup, in each little bite we find life's truth. In each little bite we find life's truth.